left our borders wide open at home.
Well, joining us is Beth Gardner, a journalist who writes for the New York Times, also The Guardian. Beth, thanks very much for being with us at this lunchtime. Let's deal with the polls first, shall we? Now, of course, here in the United Kingdom, we know that they've got the result wrong on a number of occasions recently, but certainly as things stand, they do appear to suggest that it will be President Clinton rather than President Trump.
Well, I think that is the case right now, but I do also think that Hillary Clinton's lead is a lot less comfortable than she would have hoped by this point. As you suggest, we have seen some pretty significant polling failures over the last few years. I think notably here in the 2015 general election, it was off by a good few points. Similarly, there was an Israeli election that year that was badly called. There's been a lot of volatility in the polls this year, and there's still a lot of undecided voters. 2 weeks ago, Hillary was up by, I think, an average of 5 or 6 points in the national polls. Now it's down to 3 and a bit less even in some of them. So that's a tighter margin than she would like. I think part of it may result from a sort of natural tightening of uncertain Republican voters sort of, drifting back to their party's nominee. But I think it's also been driven in part by the, very unfortunately timed, from her perspective, letter from the FBI director last weekend informing Congress that he's reviewing more of the emails from her private server. That's generated some headlines that she really would have rather avoided at this point.
Well, certainly, Beth, I mean, when you consider the electoral college system that you use in the United States...
Yes, very complicated.
Exactly that. Those swing states, the marginals, we might call them here in the United Kingdom, they do become all-important. And a national percentage, a national percentage gain that Hillary Clinton might enjoy might not necessarily translate directly into victory in those key states.
Yes, that's right. I think with a 3-point victory, if that is what it turns out to be, it's hard to see that doesn't translate into an electoral college victory. But a point or so tighter, and you could really be getting into some sketchier territory. I think there have been some shifts this year and some interesting movement sort of in the more detailed level beneath the headline numbers of those polls that are, a little bit worrying for Hillary Clinton. She would really like to see that Obama coalition of 2008 and 2012 turn out in force again. That was a very strong turnout from black voters around the country. It was young voters, the millennials, and the sort of white, college-educated suburban folks. We are seeing in some of the early voting, because, of course, a number of states have been voting already for a couple of weeks, a little bit lower of a black voter turnout than Hillary would like to see. I think that's maybe to be expected without President Obama on the ticket. But nonetheless, black voters, when they do vote, are very strongly for Hillary Clinton. So she would like to see them in maximal numbers. However, she's seeing a very somewhat increased turnout this year, it seems, from Latino voters. So the Clinton coalition may look a little different from the Obama coalition. I think that Latino turnout, we can guess, may well be driven by some of the very hostile rhetoric coming from Trump over the course of the past year towards immigrants and Latinos in particular.
Beth, why has some of the criticism made against the woman we're looking at the moment, Hillary Clinton, why has that stuck more than some of the arguments made about Donald Trump's temperament? I mean, is it simply that people in America think that potential corruption is a worse crime than sexual assault or harassment?
Well, it's a very good question. I mean, Donald Trump certainly is an absolutely unconventional candidate who has, violated sort of norm after norm, and has, said and done things, dozens, if not hundreds of things, any one of which would have been seen as completely disqualifying for a more normal candidate, Republican or Democrat. I think one, thing that we've seen is that with Hillary Clinton, there's sort of been this one thing, this one story that has just been hammered over and over again in the media, and that is the emails, the private email server. With Donald Trump, it's just been, one thing after the next. There was that Access Hollywood tape where he talked about groping. There were the dozen women who came out and, said he had groped him. There were the provocative comments on race, on gender, on NATO, the flirtation with Putin. It's almost hard to keep up. And in some ways, I think that just absolute barrage of of issues with him has almost made any one of them sort of less likely to stick. But I think it's a complicated question you ask, and I think there's going to be books written on that, after this election. And I think they're going to be interesting books too, because it's been a very sort of puzzling dynamic. Why some of these things that you would have seen as campaign ending have not actually ended his campaign.
Very, very briefly, Beth, if you will, we've learned we've learned to expect the unexpected in this campaign.
Absolutely, yeah.
Do we think we're going to see a nice straight run to polling day, or might there yet be another surprise or two?
Well, in 2004, there was a Osama bin Laden video released on the weekend before the election that some in the John Kerry camp thought, might have really swung things against him. So who knows? Never say never. We've got, 72 more hours, a few more days. Tuesday morning, polls open. Anything could happen. And we're just going to have to wait and see now. It's going to be, an interesting night on Tuesday, and it may be a long one.
It certainly will be. Beth Gardner, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, people might think of Donald Trump as a